This is Inside Town Hall, a behind-the-scenes look at city government and the issues affecting you and your family.
Thank you for joining us for this first episode of 2019. I'm your host, Madeline Shields of Inside Town Hall. Every few months we gather together several city councilors for a roundtable discussion. And this month, Theresa Stehly is joining me, as well as Greg Neitzert, Marshall Selberg, and Pat Starr. Thanks for joining us. Happy New Year, everyone. New Year. And we've got a lot to talk about for the beginning of 2019. So, Theresa, we will begin with you. What are some of the accomplishments that you hope to see in 2019?
Well, and let me mention, Madeline, that we are coming up to 1 year and 2 months before the next election. This has gone by so quickly, and all four of us were all elected together at 2016. I've been thinking about heralding back to the campaign promises I made back when I ran, and two things that have happened that I'm very grateful for is that we were able to protect the public input for our citizens. They're able to still come in and speak to us in a timely manner. And also, we were talking about the rates of our sewer project, $260 million. And we had an intense debate about how that's going to play out. So those were two good things. But talking about my hopes for the future, one of the things, and I brought my little note cards, as a teacher, I think it's good to have a visual, is that, let's get this. One of the things is the Snowgate hotline. I said this back when years ago, that it'd be nice to have a huge number or a large visible number on the motor graders as they're coming by, so that if there is a problem, a citizen can identify exactly what vehicle did that. And I would like to have a Snowgate hotline as well. What's been happening is there's a handful of people. Most people are very happy about Snowgates, but there's always a handful who have had some issues. They call me, I send them to Mark Cotter, and he's been real good about sending someone out. But I think just to alleviate that disconnect that happens with some people, I'd like to pursue this. Budget input. I had made a mention at our city council meeting recently that I'd like to have us all get together and have a working session to brainstorm about what we'd like to see in the budget as a city council, come up with some priorities. And I've got some good news that I think we're going to be moving in that direction. We haven't done that before, so getting a little budget input from all of us. You said we could have 4 things. Park board. Now, I'm happy to say that a year and a half ago, all 4 of us sitting here supported my park board ordinance that would have had us have a redistricting mandate that every district in our city would have a representative on the park board. Mm-hmm. That didn't pass at the time. I'm hoping to bring that back again, have more discussion about it, and I know our new mayor has been very cordial about saying, I want to have representation, but it'd be nice to have it memorialized in an ordinance form, as I did before. Small Business Summit. Recently we've been hearing about some of the businesses closing in our community. I've been on Facebook. I do a lot of sharing and listening. And I had reached out to Jason Ball, our chamber CEO, to say, maybe we need to have some discussions about what we can be doing within our development foundation, Forward Sioux Falls /chamber, to help encourage small businesses, because I think they're struggling.
Okay, and I'm gonna pause you right there. Okay. And I know you love the signs that you have, but we also want to get the input from our other guests on the panel. What are some of the accomplishments you'd like to see, Greg? And Theresa, we'll get back to that because we do have discussion on lots of different topics today.
Sure, and I have 2 things today, and both of them are such major topics, I think we could talk about them for an entire show, so I'll keep it really short. The 2 big things I hope that we can accomplish is bold changes to the transit system, making it better for those who need it. The administration is working on that right now, and they have a task force looking at all of the different options, and I did ride the bus last year for a day and talk to the people who wrote it, and you find out what a lifeline it is to them, and we have to figure out how we can make it sustainable and make it work even better for those who need it. So that's something that I really hope we can all make a difference in. The other one is smart growth and sustainable development. And in short, what I mean by that is we need to figure out how we can continue to do infill development, grow inside of the city, not continue to sprawl quite as much as we are, figure out how we can do projects in a way that you know, the neighborhoods can embrace, but we can get that affordable housing that we need and do things in a sustainable way. And also look at how we design our roads so we can slow traffic down and we can make it so that people will walk more and that they will feel more secure crossing the streets, because we have major issues where people are kind of on islands where, you know, they want to go to something, but then you have these major roads that are almost impassable when you have 6 lanes. And there's a lot of things other cities are doing that can make it much more friendly, and that will help the health of our citizens and help so many things. So I'd like those 2 things for us to look at.
I'd say the one thing that comes to mind to me, and I think Councilor Stehly brought it up too, is being a little bit more proactive in the budget process. And I think it also ties into one of my goals as the year comes up, is that just to kind of continue to improve in this job. You know, we're getting to be veterans now. It seems like only yesterday we were kind of the new kids doing these round tables, being brand new and learning things. And now we've kind of been around the block a couple times, and I'm hoping we can kind of use that experience, you know, when things are coming up and when things need to be done. And I think that experience really does tie in. And I think budget-wise, being a little bit more proactive, it's always said we control the purse strings, but we haven't necessarily had a lot of say in how that money is directed. I do think the new administration's reached out a little bit this past year and made some efforts that way, and that's been nice, but I think we can take that further too. So far, a lot of great ideas. I'd agree with a number of them, but I think a big thing is just to continue to learn and improve, and the way to do that, and as you do that, you'll serve the citizens better for sure.
Well, I think Councilor Selberg is exactly right. And I think one of the things that I'd like to see us do in 2019 is not only build on providing that strategic opportunity of the budget and where the future of the city goes, but to actually sit down and look at the city and put a strategic plan together. We have a $460 million enterprise with individual silos and trying, you know, with each department kind of heading where they're going. But there's not that shared overall goal. The school district has really done a good job here in Sioux Falls of leading where that strategic process is for the school district. And I think that's one of the things we're lacking as a city. And that's our role as city councilors as we've grown and gotten to know the system and be part of that, is putting a plan together that takes us over the next 20 years. So often we get caught up in the minutia of the day-to-day issues of what's happening on a small part. But when I ran for office, one of the things I really talked about is allowing us to be, the council's got to be the dreamers of the city, of where we want to go, whether it's jobs, workforce, housing, wages, so people can afford a house that we don't have to subsidize with a government subsidy, so that they can afford to raise their families and be successful in Sioux Falls, the things that we're all part of. So that strategic plan of where we want to go, what we want to do, and who we want to be as a community 20 years and 30 years from now. Because people who came before us did that. The success we see in Sioux Falls now is the planning and the things that were put in place 20 years ago that we're reaping the benefits of today. I saw an article not that long ago that said Sioux Falls will make the next mayor successful no matter what kind of happens, because we have so many good things going. But we have to bring everyone with us as we're moving forward. The other thing that, this is probably the first time that I've spent a lot of time talking to individual people, but probably the first time I've said it publicly, is I would like to see us do a review of childcare regulations and how we handle our youngest children in our community, and whether those are actually the regulations and the rules that are in place really protect those young ones and provide that safety for kids in our community and getting them started in the right direction. So over the course of the next year or two, I'd like to see us really sit down and say, okay, here's what state law is, here's what the health department in Sioux Falls has in place, and combine those and really get are we doing everything that we can to provide a safe environment for our youngest people?
One of the things, I mean, we've heard many of you agreeing on the same thing. It's workforce development, small business development, which leads us to what are some of the biggest challenges that how do you overcome? Those are huge, tall orders. And we've been talking about this for years and years, and we can look at the want ads every day, and people need employees desperately. what is going to be the very first thing that needs to be done to get more people to Sioux Falls so that we can fulfill these positions that are open?
Well, and if I may say, what the question is, what kind of jobs are we talking about? Are we talking about entry-level minimum wage jobs? Are we talking about the high-level attorney, doctor, physician jobs? One of the things that I had wanted to do, it's on my card here, but the inmate initiative, I've talked about this before, but where we would meet with and I want to take some counselors in with me to meet with the warden to say, how can we help to give opportunities to these guys that are ready to be released from prison. And I had wanted to use those people to help with our city. They're already helping with the county. I think they might help with the banquet. They're doing some things, they need some supervision, but they're doing things that are helping fill some of these needs. So that's one element. I think being creative is going to be the key thing.
One of the things I did hear someone talk about affordable housing when you're talking about getting employees, and that goes right back to your inmate initiative. Anybody who has a felony has a tremendous difficulty finding a place to live because there are not a lot of landlords or people who rent that will rent to a felon. So it gets back to not only, you know, what do you do with these people, but what do you do with these families who we desperately need to come and fulfill these jobs, but yet if they aren't making a livable wage, how do they rent an apartment that's $1,000 a month?
And that is workforce. That's a great workforce effort when you're retraining these guys. You know that they're going to be contributing members of our society. I think.
Absolutely.
I do believe.
And I did identify increasing the supply of accessible housing, which is the new word we're using rather than affordable, because unfortunately, affordable sometimes has a stigma. But that's something that we really have to work on, because obviously, whoever comes to our city has to have somewhere to live. And we have a major shortage, and we cannot build our way out of it with just single-family homes. We need multifamily, we need all levels from single family all the way up to apartments, and we have to figure out how to do that. And one of the best places that we can do it is, again, in the city, the infill development, because it has access to the things that many of them are going to need, like the bus service and so many of the services they need to get to. But we all want affordable housing, we all want accessible housing, but then obviously when it comes to our neighborhood, then we say no. So we need to figure out, I think it's about changing hearts and minds, about dealing with perception, and dealing with how can we make these different communities live and work together, you know, where we can have different land uses together that are going to work. This works in other communities. It can work, and we have to just make sure we do it sensitively and do it in a way that we preserve people's values and their character, their neighborhood. But we need to make sure that we make this work. We cannot put affordable housing, you know, on the fringe of the city, or say that we can only build it in a cornfield.
But
Yeah.
we're supposed to grow. Let me just throw this in. Mark Hodder and Mike Cooper, our planning director, have said that they're projecting we're going to grow by 100,000+ people in the next 20 years. And I've been saying to myself, where are those people going to live? That to me, that's going to be a big question. If you bring an extra 100,000 people into our town, where are they going to live?
Yeah, these things all do tie together again. Accessible housing, you're talking about transit, you're talking about workforce development. It all kind of goes hand in hand. And I think we make progress, but when we do grow at the rate we've been growing, it's hard to not necessarily just keep up, but to get as far ahead as people want to see it. I think we're moving that direction. I know the council feels strongly in moving that direction, and the administration, as Councilor Neitzert had said, has made that a focus too, to really look at affordable, accessible housing and see what we can do there.
One question I have is, you know, if they're not going to build or stay in the center of city, how do you keep people from going to T or Harrisburg or Hartford or Humboldt? And is that a challenge for the city council to keep those folks here?
Well, I think it is a challenge. I saw it this morning. I was up early taking my son to school early, and you watch around the 229 corridor the way traffic backs up in the morning of people coming from those outlying communities. But at the same time, we have to, when you get into that middle income person who needs a house that is a little bit bigger or wants a little more land, we have to look at this not just as what's good for Sioux Falls, but what's good for our region, whether that's wastewater, freshwater, that the region is competing against the rest of the world. It's not just Sioux Falls competing against the world. So we have to continue to, and I said a little bit in the beginning, but we have to continue to recruit businesses to town that pay that living wage. When you look at the income spectrum and what's available for jobs, there's lots of jobs that pay under $35,000 a year. And then you take a big flat skip in the chart all the way till you get to six figures. And once we get to a six-figure trained professional, college educated, there are lots of openings in that spectrum in that area of jobs. But it's those jobs that pay $40,000 to $60,000 to $80,000 that support a middle income family. That's where our efforts got to be. We can't continue to build housing for people who make less than $12 an hour and try to sustain them. We need to get them the educational opportunities. We need to get them into that $35,000 to $40,000 range so they can pay for their own house and what's affordable. And that we're not subsidizing that low income. There's always going to be entry-level jobs, but we have a lot of people in our community, in our region, who are working in entry-level jobs for their whole career, and we're not moving them out of the entry level to the secondary and top income jobs.
And it's almost impossible to build something right now for that particular wage range. It just is. So
let's turn our focus a little bit to the 2019 legislative session. You have a legislative agenda that the city of Sioux Falls is interested in, and a lot of the topics that we've been talking about are part of your list of what you'd like to see happen in terms of the South Dakota legislature. Let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about the workforce housing and the opportunities for families to stay here locally, but we also have a lot of English as a second language immigrants here, and let's talk about how Sioux Falls is changing and the diversity.
Well, and Councilor Starr had an amendment on these things. He had 4 amendments. They all passed. One of them was allowing people to take the driver's test in a language other than English. Now, we did pass that through. However, our Councilor Janet Brecky has been very strong about saying we need to be doing more to help people learn that language of English so that they can acclimate themselves to what we're doing here. And that's a big deal. I did share that on Facebook, and I'll tell you what, it exploded with comments. People feel very strongly about how you take your test. Are we going to be saying you can speak any language, and we'll do everything we can to allow you to do that, or do we say this is the standard? So that's going to be an ongoing discussion, I think, and I say good luck to the legislature as they take this topic on.
yeah, I mean, it's guidelines that we set as kind of a way we hope they go. It's not necessarily, obviously we're not setting any laws or anything else, but we're kind of giving our whatever influence we may have or suggestions that we have. And I thought everybody did a nice job of having some input on all these. And of course, yeah, the ones Councilor Starr brought forward certainly make a lot of sense. And as diverse as this community is getting to be, we have to have it for sure.
Well, I think there are some misconceptions of when a refugee or an immigrant comes to our community. And we were able to sit down with Lutheran Social Services here a couple weeks ago and really go through some of those myths. And people are maybe have a misperception that, they have to find a job in the first 6 weeks they're here. They've spent, on average, 10 years in a refugee camp before they come to the United States legally. They've been through some pretty tough things, but they have to find a job rather quickly or their benefits get cut quickly, and it's not much of a benefit that they get, and they have to get acclimated very quickly. You don't learn English in the first 6 weeks you're here, but most jobs that they're qualified to do to start require a driver's license. And we need them to be safe drivers in our community, and whether it's Spanish or Ethiopian or wherever that needs to be, we need to get them the skills that they need to get a job to support their family, because that's what we want them to do when they get here. We want them to learn English, we want them to assimilate into the community, and we want them to be successful. So I think that's one of the places that's an easy fix, that let's get you a driver's license as quickly as possible and continue on the process.
What do other cities and states do?
Minnesota is probably a leader. You see a lot of the Somali community is really acclimated to around the cities in the Minneapolis area and have been an asset to their community in solving some workforce development. And Minnesota has been a leader in providing multiple languages so that you can get a driver's license. So you have there are so many things that are unlocked with the driver's license or a state issued ID card and getting you through that process of getting a job. So it's that we say, if you're going to come here, we want you to work, but we've got to give you the tools to be able to work. So I'll keep going. Yep.
We're going to take a quick break, and we come back. We have a lot more to discuss, so we will be back in just a moment.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jay Allen with Falls Community Health. Whooping cough is an illness that kills over 85,000 infants globally each year. Whooping cough rates are unfortunately on the rise, with 6 times more cases this year than last in South Dakota. This is a preventable illness with the Tdap vaccine. If you are pregnant or have close contact with a baby, please consider the Tdap vaccine, as your immunity protects your infant. Ask your doctor if you're due for a booster, or contact Falls Community Health for more information.
Well, welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are having a roundtable discussion. We have Theresa Stehly, Greg Neitzert, Marshall Selberg, and Pat Starr. I didn't forget your name, I'm just pausing. And we're going to continue talking about our legislative priorities for the city of Sioux Falls. Let's move on to double taxation on public projects.
Well, I think, Madeline, one of the things that really was important to us, I think, as a city council that stood out in our legislative agenda is the state charges public entities a sales and use tax or a contractor's excise tax on publicly funded buildings. So the county right now is building a $40 million new jail expansion. Out of the cost of that, they are paying contractors' excise tax to the state in the amount of $800,000, which the state shouldn't tax another entity, public entity, for those buildings. So as the school district in Sioux Falls is adding buildings, $190 million worth of projects, they're going to have to pay a 2% contractor's excise tax. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of local tax money is being taken and shifted and paying tax to the state. That's a double taxation. I don't think that our constituents want us paying taxes on their taxes they've already paid to build public facilities. It's a big chunk of change that we have to borrow over the long term that adds to the cost of public buildings and providing a public service, whether it's schools, city administration buildings, city water projects, jail projects that the county's doing, all the way around. So we want to encourage the legislature to take a look at that and say, yeah, I know that it's a big revenue source for the state, but it doesn't make sense to double tax our citizens.
Does this pit rural South Dakota against urban South Dakota? Because, Sioux Falls, of course, is going to have more construction, bigger school districts, Rapid City, so more of that money is going to come. What about, the smaller? But
that's actually a bigger burden on a small community to have to pay additional taxes. It's a 2%. No matter what the project is, if you're a small county or community, it's going to cost you an additional 2% right off the top. For no matter what you're building, whether it's Yankton building a new swimming pool or street projects or road projects or new jails, any kind of service that the local entity is providing to a citizen. So it's not an urban-rural discussion as much as it is the state needs another form of taxes and they're taking it in a second time off of the backs of local citizens, or its citizens statewide.
Right. Okay, let's shift our focus to the emerald ash borer. This has been going on for a couple of years. We have warded it off in South Dakota for quite a long time, but it has arrived. Let's talk a little bit about what are we doing to combat this terrible little insect, and it's obviously hitting the city coffers very hard.
Well, and if I could start. This, to me, is tied in with the project trim that we use, and that's the way we've handled tree trimming in the boulevard, which has been put onto the residents to handle that cost. And so right now what has happened is the city went around and marked the trees in the boulevard, the ash trees, with a number 9, a blue 9, meaning that they are going to be removing those starting, I believe, in January. If a citizen wanted to save their tree, they needed to call the 211 help center and let them know that they're going to be doing that and not to put the 9 on the tree. But in the midst of this, I've been thinking, because I've been a big advocate of letting the city start to take on project trim, the cost of it. So I'm going to be proposing a resolution that has a compromise to that, because we're already out there putting the blue spray paint out, and we've got the blue spray paint. And what I'd like to do to help the citizens is to have the city, when they're out looking for the project trim, I would like them to spray paint the branch with, and I've researched the poles you can get with the spray paint thing, and put a blue mark, or whatever color they might have, put a mark on that branch, so then the residents know exactly which branch to take off, if they so desire. So that we're kind of combining the efforts. We did give extra money. How much was that we allocated for the project of the ash borer? We allocated
several $100,000,
and we're having new staff come on board. Also, we bought new machinery. So I think it would be a wonderfully received by our citizens if we were to say, we're going to help you out. We'll put this mark on this branch that's the offending branch, and you can do it yourself or hire a
You're talking about branches that are overhanging on the boulevard that citizens are expected to trim themselves,
right? Or the sidewalk. Yes, the policy has been, for the most part, the city just drives through with their truck, and if they see there's a branch out of compliance, they just send you a letter. They have not identified where that is. So this would be helpful, I think.
Okay, let's get back to the emerald ash borer. How many trees are we losing? It's citywide, and with the ice storm a few years ago, this is devastating to many areas of Sioux Falls.
Yeah, it's something around 60 or 80,000, something like that. It's thousands and thousands of trees that we have.
The Parks Department's done a good job of taking a look at all the trees throughout all of the public right-of-ways, the public spaces, and 80,000 is the number. The one good thing about this is that Dr. Ball from the SDSU the other day said that they've 30 below temperatures we've experienced already this winter killed the emerald ash borer. So I'm not sure that I want to encourage more 30 below temperatures, but that's one way to at least slow them down, and it actually kills the larvae as they're part of it. So the cold weather part of it is also helping us slow the progression. But overall, in the long term, our ash trees are going to be basically gone. So.
And they're working on a 10-year plan. And they've learned from other communities that there's essentially a death curve, which means that the trees die slowly in the early years, but then they really speed up. And it would be devastating to our city budget if we waited, because we'd have to do it all in a very short period of time. So we have a 10-year plan of trying to remove 10% of the trees in the boulevards and the parks over that time frame. And as we do that, we plant new trees and transition into getting more diversity.
And I think the city has done a nice job of being preemptive on the subject. They've tried to get out in front of this as much as we can. And I think they're already starting to remove some of the trees. I know a fund's been started that we've talked about a little bit about, where it's a collaborative effort between both public and private to help raise some funds to replenish some trees that'll be gone. So I think they're off to a good start anyway, as good as you could be.
And that's called the Relief Program, and it's RELEAF. And there is a public-private partnership to help people plant trees, not ash trees, other kinds of trees, to help replenish the trees that we are losing in Sioux Falls.
And that they're still doing some fundraising on that and kind of firming up the details of that. But the citizens also need to know that to replant a tree in the boulevards, you do need to get a permit. There's no charge for that, but they want to make sure that they're having a diversity of species being planted. A big thank you to the master gardeners, because they were out helping the city identify where these ash trees were. It was a huge undertaking. And also, people can try to treat their trees, because apparently you do it every 2 years, and there's been some success with that.
And you can contact the Extension Service to find out more about that. Thank you all for being here for this first Inside Town Hall of 2019. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
And that's our time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.